I recognize the Honourable Leader of the NDP.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, thousands of children, teachers, and education workers across the province returned to the classroom for another school year in the wake of the Auditor General's recent report that found that instances of school violence had increased by 60% over the past years. This was no surprise to families, staff, and educators who have been raising alarms for years, but it was somehow a surprise to this government, who, while this report was being written, maintained that school violence rates were stable. And so my question for the Premier is, why did his government ignore this growing problem until the Auditor General released her report?
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and everyone has a right to expect that their children will be safe at school, that the people who work in our schools, our teachers and other professionals who work in our schools, are safe when they're in their places of employment. We all want that as Nova Scotians. That's not a political thing. That's just a Nova Scotian. That's a human thing, Madam Speaker. It's something we all want. The reality is that violence and crime in our communities exists in our society. It's finding its way into our schools. We're taking action as a province to make sure that our schools are safe places for everyone who is in those buildings, and we'll continue to do that, Madam Speaker. This is something that all Nova Scotians want, particularly us on this side of the government.
I recognize the Leader of the NDP.
That violence has been rising, Madam Speaker, for 7 years, and yet last year, this government said it was stable. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, who represent thousands of school support staff across the province, have attributed this rise in school violence in part to the 2018 dissolution of school boards and the attending loss of community oversight, transparency, and decision-making ability, and I'll table that. With alarming statistics around school violence in the AG report, overcrowded schools, delays in school capital investments, families deserve transparency and a seat at the table, but this government has now abandoned their 2021 campaign promise to reinstate these elected school boards with no explanation. The government previously described school boards as a critical check and balance in the system.
Order. Would anyone like to respond to that? We will be sticking to the 50 seconds to have the question out. I recognize the Leader of the NDP for her final supplementary.
What? Wow. Madam Speaker, it is shameful that this Premier, once again...
Order.
I can't...
So, what I'd like to do is just explain the rules. The rules are you have 50 seconds to get the question out, or 45. Sorry. I would just like to explain the rules to you. I recognize the Honourable Leader of the NDP.
Madam Speaker, this Premier will answer one question a day from each opposition party, and I'm sorry if he doesn't get the question mark in the end, but it is unbelievable that this Premier, who has decided to break yet another election promise, not to reinstate elected school boards, will not even stand in his place and answer the question, which I will pose very clearly with the question mark in the time allotted. Why have you broken the promise to Nova Scotian families and students when violence has been up 60%, when school capital is failing across this province to reinstate elected school boards, which you hammered this leader for incessantly in his time in office?
I ask going forward that the member speaks through me, and that includes everyone in the room. I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the safety of our schools is incredibly important to all Nova Scotians. It would be disingenuous for somebody to suggest that any Nova Scotian doesn't want students to be safe at school. It would be disingenuous for any Nova Scotian to suggest that any Nova Scotian doesn't want the people who work in those buildings to be safe. Of course we want that. We're working with the SACs. The SACs will be meeting this month with the province to talk about a code of conduct and what's possible. We all have a role in protecting students. We don't need to scare people what's happening in our province. We take the safety of our students very seriously, and we'll continue to do that, Madam Speaker.